Chris, you went kind of viral over the week because you got some really good nuggets, I would say, when it comes to how you found out that the Bears spot at 10 in the draft might not be what we think it is.
Yeah, Layla Marshall, good to be with you. Yeah, poking around the league as I often try to do and see what's happening up at Haugh, what they're looking at, and I kind of got some insights into the idea that the Bears are indeed drawn perhaps to the idea of moving up in the top 10. And these are all scenarios. I'd preface everything by saying these are all just scenarios and considerations at this point, but it makes sense. And here's why it makes sense. And I wrote about it on 670thescore.com. You can check out the full column if you want to catch it all later. But the premise of this idea is that this is not going to cost a significant haul to move up. This is not a considerably strong draft. And because of that, the cost of doing business is not what it usually is. So if the Bears want to move up, say, call it the 4 spot, the New England Patriots are sitting there at 4. You're not going to have to give up a significant haul. You're talking about potentially dealing just one of your 2 second-round picks and making the move from 10 to 4. That puts you in a position to guarantee you're getting one of your blue-chip guys where, frankly, the 10 spot's not a great spot in which to be with this draft. So it's something they're certainly considering. I think all teams are kind of looking at the board right now and saying, how can we jump up and make that move? And there's a lot of factors and plays and variables that will play out here in the next 3 weeks up until draft night. But away we go. It's going to be really interesting.
I did appreciate you talking about just how the NFL is valuing picks in this draft. We talk about it a lot in the NBA. You know, Marshall and I were discussing the benefits of a simple pick swap when it came to the Rockets and the Suns a couple of years ago. That's reaping benefits for both teams. We don't do that enough in the NFL and in football, I don't think. You also mentioned a trade up 2 spots to the number 8 overall pick currently held by the Panthers would cost the Bears their 3rd round pick and net Carolina's 5th round selection according to the trade chart. So that echoes a little bit of what you're saying, how the value of the picks is different based on what the Bears' assets are.
You're right. Yeah. And the reason why is because of how NIL has reshaped the way that the NFL draft plays out. Players who would normally declare for the draft 10 years ago are much more incentivized now than they were before to stick around in the college game. A lot of them are making more money being a college star than they would be a 5th round pick in the NFL. And the value now is sticking around in the college game. So there's fewer underclassmen declaring, which means the bottom of the draft is not as exciting as it used to be. There's not a ton of value. A lot of these trade charts now that were built 10 years ago are a little irrelevant at this point because the value of those day 3 picks are simply not what they used to be. So there's a reason why teams are looking at the day 3 of the draft a lot differently than they were before. And also the top of this draft isn't great either. This is a starter's draft is what a lot of the experts are calling it. Guys like Daniel Jeremiah, whose opinion I respect so highly, he said that there's only a couple, transcendent superstar level prospects. You're talking about Abdul Carter, obviously, Travis Hunter, potentially, Mason Graham's a guy I'm very high on, Ashton Genty. There's not a lot of those guys who are saying this is a guy who's going to reshape our franchise. And if you're sitting there where the Bears are right now with the 10th pick, you're saying, give us the best player available. That might not be the most exciting player. That might not be somebody you're really thrilled about getting inside Haugh. So, yeah, if you want to make that move, Carolina is an interesting spot because they seem to have their quarterback in Bryce Young now. He really stepped it up late last season. And because of that, they might be willing to make that move. That might be a spot in which the Bears can jump up and solidify somebody who might not be there for pick 10. That is one scenario. Yeah, so the 3rd round pick makes sense. You can make that move with the 5th coming back or day 3 swap, whatever it is to equal things out on the trade chart. But yeah, there's a lot of ways the Bears can maximize their value with a top 10 pick.
Chris, it's interesting because last year we all remember how the dream scenario in some people's minds was to have a quarterback and a receiver and Rome Odunze both taken in the top 10. And it worked out perfectly for the Bears. But with the lack of star quarterback power or the need of quarterback for some of these teams, it seems like this is one of the all-timers as far as a draft where you're drafting as low as the Bears in the 1st round at 10, where you really can't predict how things are going to go because, one, we haven't seen any trades so far, but also we don't know what the teams 1 through 9, if they all keep their picks, are even going to do.
Marshall, this is the latest in more than 3 decades in which not a single pick has been dealt in the first round. And usually there's some kind of movement by now. If not from the previous season with some kind of deadline swap, then at this point there's some kind of movement. There's not been a single team trading out from the first round. And it kind of reflects what you're saying there is that there's not that run on quarterbacks yet. There's 2, maybe 3 guys who are going to go high when you're talking about the quarterback position. If you're a Bears fan, root for Jackson Dart to be up there. Like, start hyping up Jackson Dart as the second coming of whatever, because you'd love to have that trickle down. Adam Schefter of ESPN was talking a couple days ago saying that he thinks Cleveland and New York, the Giants, could be looking at position players, not quarterbacks. That'd be Abdul Carter, that'd be Travis Hunter, if indeed Cam Ward is going number 1 overall. So now the trickle down to the Bears is that could set up the Patriots, who do have their quarterback in Drake May, to be more motivated to move down. So the scenario I'm setting up now of potentially making this trade, it could go 1 of 2 ways. One is you can have a deal done anytime in the next 3 weeks leading up to night 1 up in Green Bay, and you make that move up to 4 with the Patriots. Maybe it's 8 with the Panthers, wherever it may be. You have that deal done, and you're jumping the line. You don't necessarily have to say we're getting this guy because we're here. You're just saying our cloud is now 3 or 4 guys, and we feel really great about those guys being blue chip players. Or you could just set up the framework of these deals ahead of time, and maybe it's you got a handshake in place with the Patriots for when they go on the clock. And if Hunter and Carter are gone and they're ready to trade down, then you got that deal in place, and you have that agreement set, and suddenly the Bears jump up to the clock. Maybe it's the Jaguars at pick 5 right there as well. They got Trevor Lawrence in place. So I think there's going to be a lot of teams that are motivated at some point in time to move down from the top 5 or the top 8. And if the Bears want to make that move up, it's not going to cost them a significant deal.
I also think it's valid, though, to point out that I don't know that the Bears, even in trading up for somebody and losing one of their picks in this draft, is a good idea at all. Like, you can make the argument that based on what they still need as a team, especially with the 4 picks in the top 72, that I want to keep all of those for that reason that you mentioned, Chris. At least you get a more accurate understanding of what you can expect.
I'm with you. I usually would not advocate for this kind of stuff. I'm a believer in having as much, the trade down scenarios and building up your stockpile of the draft capital and seeing what you can do with it. And it's unfortunate because the Bears have not drafted well in the mid to late rounds. Ryan Poles does not have a strong track record where you can hang your hat on it and say, we're going to get some really good guys here on day 2 and day 3 who are going to be starters down the road or whatever it may be. That's not a reason to give up your day 2 picks. You shouldn't say, well, I'm not good at drafting, so I'm going to trade these picks away. But the reality is that it's not a super strong draft. There's less or there's more variability and less assurity in those spots. So I think that's part of the motivation. And frankly, the Bears feel like they're in a really good spot now moving forward where you can get somebody in the top 10 who's going to be an impact player for many years to come. And there's a lot of different ways you can look at it. Like, my guy, if they're making that move up to the pick 4, my guy is Mason Graham. I've been beating the drum for Mason Graham out of Michigan for a while. I think he has the highest floor in this draft of anybody out there. I think he's a 10-year type starter on the defensive line, and he's somebody where you make that pick, you feel really good about it. He's your guy for the long term and really a disruptive presence for that defensive front. But there's a lot of different ways you can look at it, too. Maybe it is the Tyler Ward. Our buddy Mark Grote's been talking about Tyler Ward. I think he's been advocating for that pick. Makes a lot of sense. The Ashton Genty thing is certainly out there, and I think there is real consideration to that at this point. It's a curious move because what it tells me is that the Bears are ready to win now, that they feel like they've got everything in place to be an NFC North contender, to be a legitimate championship contender if they make that move. It's not the long-term play, and it certainly is putting a lot on the arms of your second-year quarterback, but it would tell me that the Bears feel really confident about where they stand.
Chris Emma, our Score Bears reporter, on with us to talk all things draft and the possibility that the Bears might even trade up in this draft, knowing they've got 4 of the top 72 picks. Chris, let's go back to what you talked about with the NIL affecting the quality of the later round picks, because this has been a thing, but it seems like it's becoming a bigger thing. Is this something that's going to cause teams to operate differently when you talk about how they view those back half draft picks in the future and maybe as early as this draft? I'm wondering how that changes the entire landscape of how you build a team, because many teams depend on their development of players who are drafted, let's say after the third round, as why they can get the most out of them, especially teams who go to the playoffs every year, right? That's where they get a lot of guys, because they don't get a lot of top 15, top 20 picks.
You're right. Yeah. And to the Bears' credit, they've been out in front of this trend. Like, they've recognized and forecasted the talent in day 3 of the draft and said, we're better off trading for Ryan Bates or Jonah Jackson or Joe Thuney than we are sitting here and seeing what we can get with these picks. And Ryan Poles has been very aggressive dealing day 3 picks to get veteran guys who he sees as plug-and-play talents. And I give the Bears credit for that. They were out in front of this, I think, a lot more than some of these other teams were in terms of assessing the value of those picks as being lesser than they were before. And sure, you can go back to the 22 or 23 draft and find some guys who were day 3 standouts and superstar level pickups and say, man, the Bears really whiffed on this guy. But there's so few of those guys at this point now. It's a different value system because of the way that NIL has played out. It's impacted everything, certainly the college game, but obviously the trickle to effect to the NFL as well. And so if you're a college player and you're getting 5th round grades or 6th round grades, and there's even the chance you go undrafted, versus the chance of sticking around with a power program and getting $1 million+ an NIL deal to stick around for one more year, why wouldn't you take that? Forgive me, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but I've written about it before. Like every year, there's fewer and fewer underclassmen declaring for the NFL draft than there were in years past, and that trend is going to stay that way until there's some kind of NIL regulation. But that certainly doesn't seem like it's coming anytime soon.
Well, I also think it just makes things more accurate. We live in a capitalist society. Money is how we measure people's value in the NFL. So it would make sense that the money that is being spent on certain players based on the values to their team will give you a little bit more accurate assumption of how some of these people are actually valued. Like that makes all the sense in the world. I don't necessarily mind that the draft is now less unpredictable. I also think it keeps a lot of GMs, Chris, from being the guy who thinks that he can reinvent the wheel. And I think there's a lot of those in the league.
Yeah, we've certainly seen a few of them in Chicago. I mean, it's just, yeah, you're exactly right. And I think it challenges teams now to evolve with the draft. And so when we're setting up these scenarios of trading like this is a way of trying to evolve with this trend. Like you said, I give Ryan Poles and his brass a ton of credit for trying to be out in front of this. And this Bears front office is trying to be cutting edge in more ways than just this. I mean, we know about the approach to analytics. We heard Ben Johnson citing the analytics he wants to value. Like it's refreshing to see the Bears being on the cutting edge, because that's just not something that's been the case for year after year. They value ways of how can we be better than other teams? How can we take advantage of this trend or that trend? And it's good to see there's some smart people up there at Haugh. And I know things haven't worked out the last couple of years under Poles' watch. This is a prove-it year. And it's such a huge part of his job is going to be hitting on these draft picks, because as you continue to invest in this roster through free agency and try to patch holes in ways that you messed up in the draft, you got to hit with these mid and late round picks as well. Joe Thuney is a great pickup, but he's also on the wrong side of 30. You don't know how long you're going to have with him. Jonah Jackson was a great pickup as well. Starter right away for you this year. You don't know if he's going to be great. You don't know what you're getting in him yet. So when you talk about investing, and in particular here with the offensive line, you've got to be able to make sure you're assessing and getting quality depth in there, not just through the draft, but through the waiver wires, through any means possible to make this roster deeper, younger, and more talented. So you're able to graduate from a Joe Thuney to a young player coming up and stepping in that guard position.
All right, Chris. So you mentioned that the numbers were down. So I looked it up because I wanted to be able to tell everyone. So basically 70 undergraduate guys in the draft this year. Now, that's more than last year when it was 60, but it peaked back in 2018. It was 106, and then it went down to 99 in 2019. So it's definitely dwindling from what we saw about 5 or 6 years ago with all the NIL money and everything going forward. My question is this: how much pressure now is on Ryan Poles for this draft specifically? He does not have a good track record overall when it comes to the draft. Now, he's made some deals which allowed them to get the number 1 overall pick, in which they selected Caleb Williams. Obviously, Rome Odunze is a guy who could end up being wide receiver number 1 down the road. But if you look at the entirety of the draft selections, I think most people would come to the conclusion that he has not been above average, and some would say even a poor drafter overall. So how much pressure is there on Ryan Poles, knowing not how long his contract is up till to get it done this year and do it right?
Yeah, there's a ton of pressure. Look, Kansas City has been a modern NFL dynasty in large part because of Patrick Mahomes, obviously. But you look at the way that they've been able to assess that roster, keep turning things over year after year. It's because of the way that they've been able to address and land needs in the later rounds. They've been so good at evaluating talent and building a deep roster where you're able to trade off a Joe Thuney because you got somebody ready to step in there. The Bears have not done that yet. They've not hit on those picks. If you want to look at Ryan Poles' draft resume to this point, there's not something where you say, man, that's like pound for pound a great pick. Like maybe Braxton Jones in the 5th round as a starter. Maybe that's the pick you hang your hat on. Kyler Gordon, his first ever draft pick coming in the 2nd round. Good pickup. But like there's not a long list of guys where you say Ryan Poles' draft success stories. He needs to have a great draft. He needs to really hit on some of these picks. And not just saying like day one starters this year. I'm talking about developmental guys. I'm talking about guys who are starters next year, the year after that. Like they've just not done anything in these first 3 drafts where this is the rebuilding period now. In theory, it's done. You hope you're done rebuilding at this point. There's not a ton of, this great influx of young talent coming through the draft. And it's why you have to go trade for Joe Thuney and Jonah Jackson and make all these aggressive moves in free agency to bolster this roster. They had a great offseason, but you would like to be that team that's sitting back in March and not rushing to sign everybody because you've drafted and developed so well. So Ryan Poles seems to have a clean slate right now. He's got Ben Johnson in charge. There's a lot of hope and excitement for this thing, and obviously so much of it relies on Caleb Williams and where he can take the Bears. But as you look to the future, as you forecast 2, 3, 4 years down the road, this is a significant draft to try to strengthen the bottom of this roster and get guys who are starters in the years to come.